Welcome to the Coins Explorer, where ordinary pocket change transforms into extraordinary stories of hidden fortune, lost history, and unbelievable discoveries. And today we're stepping deep into one of the most talked about and controversial legends in American coin collecting. The 1944 wheat penny that under the rarest circumstances has been associated with values climbing as high as an astonishing $311 million. A figure that sounds impossible until you understand how wartime pressure, minting chaos, and human error converge to create the perfect storm of rarity and intrigue. And what if I told you that a single wheat penny struck more than 80 years ago during World War II could theoretically rival the value of world-famous paintings, rare diamonds, and historic artifacts, not because it was meant to be special, but because it was never supposed to exist in the form that a handful of these coins were born into. Because 1944 was a critical transition year for the United States Mint, a year when the nation was still fully engaged in war and every ounce of metal mattered, leading to rushed production schedules, recycled materials, and overstressed mint facilities where mistakes were far more likely to slip through unnoticed, and the wheat penny of 1944 was officially intended to be struck on a copper-based alloy made from melted-down shell casings. Returning to a traditional look after the emergency steel cents of 1943, yet leftover steel planchets remained in the system, hiding in bins, stuck in machinery, or mixed with copper blanks, creating the legendary wrong planchet errors where a 1944 date was struck onto zinc-coated steel intended for the previous year, and this single mistake instantly created a coin that defied official records, because no steel cents were authorized for 1944, making every genuine example a numismatic contradiction. And that contradiction is the foundation of extreme value, especially when combined with how few confirmed specimens are known to exist across all mints, because rarity is not just about low mintage numbers, but about how many examples survive, how many are authentic, and how many collectors want them. And with the 1944 steel wheat penny, demand has only grown as awareness spreads, yet beyond steel planchets lies an even deeper layer of possibility that fuels the $311 million narrative. Experimental and transitional alloys quietly tested during wartime that never made it into official documentation, meaning a 1944 wheat penny struck on an unknown or improperly mixed metal composition would represent a unique artifact of secretive mint experimentation, especially if metallurgical testing revealed unusual percentages of tin, zinc, or other elements inconsistent with known copper alloys of the time. And when collectors imagine values reaching hundreds of millions, they are often envisioning a coin that combines multiple layers of rarity, such as a wrong planchet strike paired with an experimental alloy signature in pristine condition, because condition is everything in the upper stratosphere of coin valuation, where a single grade difference can multiply value exponentially, and many error coins were discovered decades ago when collectors did not yet understand their importance, resulting in damage, cleaning, or loss, making an untouched, high-grade survivor almost mythological. And then there are dramatic die errors that can appear on 1944 wheat pennies, such as bold double dies created when the working die received multiple misaligned hub impressions, causing visible doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto, errors that collectors actively hunt for because they represent a clear and undeniable mint mistake. And when such doubling appears on a coin already wrong in metal or weight, the rarity compounds rather than adds, turning a curiosity into a potential crown jewel. And weight anomalies themselves are another crucial clue, because a normal 1944 copper wheat penny weighs approximately 3.11 grams, while a steel planchet weighs significantly less, and an experimental alloy could fall anywhere outside normal tolerance, meaning even a small scale can reveal whether a penny deserves deeper investigation, and magnetism becomes another simple yet powerful test, because a genuine 1944 steel wheat penny will stick to a magnet instantly, unlike copper examples or plated counterfeits, yet the flood of fake and altered coins over the years has ironically driven values higher for genuine examples, because every authentic coin must now pass rigorous authentication involving X-ray fluorescence testing, microscopic analysis, and dye study comparisons, and a coin that survives that process becomes far more than metal. It becomes proof, and proof is priceless in a market flooded with imitations, and beyond wrong metal and doubled dyes. There are striking errors like off-center strikes, broad strikes, die clashes where Lincoln's portrait and wheat ears leave ghostly impressions, and even cap die strikes that produce distorted, almost surreal images. And while many of these errors exist across different years, their appearance on a 1944 wheat penny carries extra weight because the year itself is already historically charged, representing a nation pushing its industrial capacity to the limit. And some collectors believe that a perfect storm coin exists, or once existed, a 1944 wheat penny struck on steel or an experimental alloy, showing dramatic doubling, preserved in near-perfect condition, and traceable to an early discovery with clear provenance. And it's this hypothetical but plausible combination that fuels whispers of nine-figure valuations, because the coin would not just be rare, it would be singular, a museum-level artifact that could redefine what a penny is worth. And in the world of elite collecting, where billionaires compete for the rarest tangible pieces of history, price becomes secondary to ownership, because there may never be another opportunity to acquire such an object, and that mindset is what pushes theoretical values into territory that sounds impossible to everyday collectors. And the wheat penny design itself adds emotional power to the story, because it represents an era of American resilience. With Lincoln's calm profile and the wheat ears symbolizing prosperity during hardship, making a 1944-era penny not just a mistake, but a time capsule from one of the most intense periods in modern history. And stories continue to circulate of remarkable discoveries made in old jars, inherited collections, or estate holdings where pennies were saved without knowing why, fueling the belief that undiscovered treasures may still exist, especially since many families hoarded coins during the war years out of patriotism or habit, not realizing that a single wrong coin could later become legendary. And this possibility keeps collectors searching, weighing, magnet testing, and closely inspecting every 1944 wheat penny they encounter, because the difference between a common cent and a life-changing artifact can be invisible to the untrained eye, hiding in subtle details like metal color, edge texture, strike sharpness, and microscopic doubling. And the legend of the 1944 wheat penny worth $311 million endures not because such a sale has already happened, but because numismatic history has repeatedly shown that unprecedented prices emerge when rarity, story, condition, and demand collide. And every time a new era coin sets a record, it reinforces the idea that the next great discovery could be even more valuable. And that is why this penny continues to captivate collectors, investors, and dreamers alike, because it proves that the smallest denomination can carry the largest dreams, and that sometimes history's greatest treasures are not locked in vaults or displayed behind glass, but quietly waiting to be recognized for what they truly are, a reminder that extraordinary value can be hidden in the most ordinary places, and that the hunt itself is what keeps the legend alive. Next, 1945 wheat penny. Today, we are diving into one of the most astonishing and jaw-dropping pieces in the numismatic universe, a coin so rare and so extraordinary that it has captured the imaginations of collectors and investors alike. The 1945 wheat penny, a seemingly ordinary coin at first glance, but one that has skyrocketed in value to an astonishing $290 million due to its remarkable errors, misstrikes, and production anomalies that make it a true treasure in the history of American coinage. And if you are passionate about coins, or even just curious about how a tiny copper piece can become the centerpiece of millions of dollars in auctions, this is a story that will blow your mind and elevate your appreciation for rare coins to an entirely new level. The 1945 wheat penny was minted during a pivotal time in U.S. history, just as World War II was drawing to a close, and the nation was transitioning from wartime to peacetime, which created unique circumstances in the production of pennies, particularly because the U.S. Mint had to adjust its materials and processes due to the wartime copper shortage, which in earlier years had led to the 1943 steel cent, and even after copper returned for the 1944 and 1945 pennies, variations in the alloy, compositions, die usage, and mint handling created opportunities for errors that today are considered priceless. And this is where the 1945 Wheat Pennies story becomes truly fascinating, because unlike standard circulation pennies, which were produced in the millions with little attention to uniqueness, some of these 1945 pennies experienced a range of anomalies including double dies, repunched mint marks, off-center strikes, die cracks, and planchet flaws, each of which can drastically increase the coin's value depending on rarity, condition, and collector demand. And when you examine one of these rare 1945 wheat pennies, experts note subtle but critical differences, such as misaligned dies that cause doubling of the lettering, the Liberty, or the date appearing thicker or slightly shifted, and small die chips that appear like raised bumps, all of which make each coin unique and distinguishable from a standard issue. And in some cases, these errors were compounded by human oversight during the minting process, as coins were hand-fed and inspected with the technology of the 1940s, which was far less precise than modern minting procedures, leading to a rare convergence of factors that would be impossible to replicate intentionally, further driving the collectability and astronomical value of these pennies. Beyond simple misprints, the 1945 wheat penny is also famous for rare material anomalies, including pennies struck on leftover 1943 steel planchets mistakenly stored with the 1945 copper planchets, creating an extraordinary variety of coins with magnetic properties or unusual coloration that immediately catch the attention of collectors. And even more intriguing are the pennies that exhibit striking errors such as double-struck features, where the coin received multiple impressions from the die, due to misfeeds in the coining press, creating ghostly images of Lincoln's profile or the wheat stalks, a phenomenon so rare that just a single well-preserved specimen can fetch tens of millions at auction. And this is precisely why the 1945 wheat penny is considered one of the crown jewels of American numismatics, because each error tells a story of the minting process, historical context, and sheer chance that no human could reproduce with modern machinery, turning what might seem like a minor imperfection into a multi-million-dollar treasure. The 1945 wheat penny's allure is also tied to its scarcity, as most coins of this era were circulated extensively, and only a handful survived with such pristine and unusual errors intact, meaning collectors are competing fiercely for the few specimens that exist in near-perfect condition, and auction records have repeatedly demonstrated this intense demand, with some coins reaching unbelievable prices due to provenance, rarity, and the mystique surrounding their creation. And what makes these coins even more fascinating is the detective work involved in authenticating them, because not every coin with a small error is necessarily worth millions, as subtle distinctions such as the depth of the doubling, the type of die crack, or the alignment of repunched mint marks can distinguish a common error from one of historical and financial significance, which means collectors and graders must study the coin under magnification, compare it to verified specimens, and consider historical minting records to ensure authenticity, making the acquisition of a true 1945 wheat penny error not just a purchase, but a conquest of numismatic knowledge and meticulous research. Another layer of intrigue comes from the specific types of errors found on 1945 pennies, including the rare off-center strikes, where the coin is slightly misaligned during pressing, causing Lincoln's face or the wheat stalks to be partially cropped, an error that seems simple, but is exceedingly rare in coins from this period because the U.S. Mint generally had rigorous quality control even during wartime, and the visual impact of such a coin is dramatic, instantly recognizable even to casual collectors. And then There are the die cracks and cod errors, where small sections of the die broke off or cracked during production, leaving raised, irregular lines or blobs on the coin surface, giving it an almost sculptural appearance. And coins with these types of errors in high-grade condition are incredibly sought after, with auction houses often featuring them as marquee items, driving up bids exponentially. The combination of historical context, production anomalies, and the sheer rarity of certain error types means that the 1945 Wheat Penny is not just a coin, but a story encapsulated in copper, a tangible piece of history that bridges World War II-era America and the modern collector's market. And because every error is slightly different, each coin carries a unique fingerprint, making it impossible to mass-produce or fake convincingly without advanced minting technology, which adds to its desirability and explains why some specimens have sold for astonishing sums approaching $290 million. A figure that might seem unbelievable for a coin that originally had a face value of just 1 cent, yet the rarity, perfection, and historical significance make this valuation a reality for serious collectors willing to invest heavily in the ultimate numismatic prize. In addition, provenance plays a huge role in the value of 1945 Wheat Pennies, because coins with well-documented histories, perhaps originating from early hoards, prestigious private collections, or famous auctions, can see their value jump dramatically as collectors not only purchase a rare error, but also the story and authenticity associated with it, which in the world of ultra-rare coins often matters as much as the coin itself. And when combined with the coin's physical condition, factors like luster, color, absence of wear, and clarity of errors, the result is a staggering valuation that can dwarf other rarities from the same era, proving that even a humble penny can achieve legendary status under the right circumstances. The excitement around these coins also sparks widespread interest among new collectors and investors who see the 1945 Wheat Penny as the ultimate illustration of numismatic potential, showing that meticulous attention to detail, patience, and a keen eye for anomalies can transform a small copper disc into a multi-million-dollar asset, and this has led to increased awareness, education, and even speculation in the coin market, further amplifying the allure of these rare error pennies. Ultimately, the 1945 Wheat Penny's $290 million valuation is a testament to the intersection of history, craftsmanship, chance, and collector passion, encapsulating why numismatics is far more than a hobby. It is the pursuit of rare stories, historical moments, and tangible beauty that can literally change lives, making every examination of these coins an adventure in discovery, every auction a high-stakes thrill, and every acquisition a piece of history secured. And for anyone fortunate enough to hold or study such a coin, it is a reminder that even the smallest, most ordinary-seeming objects can hold unimaginable value, influence, and significance, and that the 1945 Wheat Penny, with its errors, mistakes, and extraordinary provenance, stands as a shining example of how rarity, historical context, and chance converge to create one of the most valuable coins in the world. A true masterpiece of numismatic history, whose story will continue to inspire collectors and enthusiasts for generations to come. Next, 1954's Wheat Penny. Today we're diving into one of the most shocking and controversial legends in American numismatics, the story of the 1954's Lincoln Wheat Penny that has been whispered about as a coin potentially worth an astonishing $290 million, a claim that instantly grabs attention and sparks curiosity among collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people who wonder if a simple penny could truly change a life. And as we explore this coin, we're going to unpack why this particular year and mark combination has fueled so much excitement, what kinds of errors and mistakes could elevate an ordinary wheat cent into a once-in-a-lifetime rarity, and how a perfect storm of history, minting anomalies, survival rates, and collector demand could theoretically push a humble copper coin into the realm of unimaginable value. because the Lincoln Wheat Penny series already holds legendary status. Minted from 1909 to 1958, it represents an era when coins were made of solid copper alloy, struck with heavy dies, and produced under conditions that sometimes allowed extraordinary errors to slip through, and by 1954 the United States Mint was operating at full speed in the post-war economy, churning out millions of coins to meet the demands of commerce. With the San Francisco Mint striking pennies marked with a small but powerful S mint mark. A mint that historically produced lower mintages and more inconsistencies compared to Philadelphia. And while on paper the 1954 S Wheat Penny had a mintage in the tens of millions, making it seem common at first glance, rarity in the coin world is not just about how many were made, it's about how many survive today in exceptional condition or with dramatic mint errors. And this is where the legend of the ultra-valuable 1954 S Wheat Penny begins to take shape. Because collectors know that San Francisco cents from the 1950s often suffer from weak strikes, uneven planchets, and die wear, which can create unusual characteristics that, when combined with specific errors, turn an everyday coin into something extraordinary. And one of the most talked about possibilities surrounding this coin is the existence of a major wrong planchet error, where a penny is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different metal entirely. And if a genuine 1954 S Wheat Penny were discovered struck on a silver dime planchet, a brass foreign planchet, or an experimental alloy never meant for circulation, the rarity would instantly skyrocket, because such errors are not only scarce but historically important, representing a breakdown in the minting process that was never supposed to happen. And another powerful factor is the idea of a double die obverse or reverse so dramatic that it rivals the most famous double dies in history, where the date, lettering, and Lincoln's portrait shows strong, clearly separated doubling visible without magnification. And while minor doubling is common and often dismissed, a true hub double die from 1954 S would be virtually unheard of, especially since San Francisco double dies are far rarer than those from Philadelphia. And if such a coin existed in pristine, uncirculated condition, it would become the centerpiece of the entire Lincoln cent series, commanding astronomical interest and bidding wars among elite collectors and institutions. And then there's the possibility of a transitional or experimental error, which is where the value speculation reaches almost mythical levels, because the mid-1950s were a time of ongoing metallurgical testing at the mint, and although the official composition of the penny did not change until later decades, there is always the chance that experimental blanks or test planchets were present in the mint facilities, and a 1954 S penny struck on an unauthorized or undocumented experimental alloy would not just be a coin. It would be a historical artifact, a unique survivor that tells a secret story about what was happening behind the scenes at the mint. And uniqueness is the single most powerful driver of extreme value, because when a coin is truly one of one, there is no price guide, no comparison, only what the most determined collector is willing to pay, and condition plays an equally critical role, because even the rarest error loses significant value if it is heavily worn, damaged, or cleaned. But imagine a flawless mint state example with blazing original luster, razor-sharp details, and eye appeal so strong it looks like it was struck yesterday. Such a coin would redefine expectations and become the ultimate prize. And beyond errors, there is also the factor of die state anomalies, such as severe die breaks, retained cut errors, or dramatic die clashes that leave ghostly impressions of design elements in places they should never appear. And while minor die cracks are common, a massive retained cut on a 1954 S Wheat Penny, especially one that frames Lincoln's portrait or distorts the date and mint mark, could create a visually stunning coin that collectors would fight to own. And the S mint mark itself adds another layer of intrigue, because San Francisco mint marks are often weak, mispunched, or even repunched in earlier decades, and a highly dramatic mint mark error, such as a misplaced S, a doubled S, or an S punched over another mint mark, would be an extraordinary discovery, especially for a year like 1954 where such errors are virtually unknown. And then there's the human side of the story, the reason why values can climb into the hundreds of millions when the narrative captures the imagination of the public, because coins are not just metal, they are stories, and a 1954 Wheat penny tied to a unique minting mistake, discovered decades later in a roll, a collection, or even circulation, becomes a symbol of hidden fortune and lost history. And when mainstream attention, media coverage, and viral stories collide with hardcore collector demand, prices can reach levels that seem unbelievable, not because of face value or melt value, but because of desire, prestige, and the fear of missing out on owning the greatest Lincoln set ever known. And it's important to understand that the $290 million figure represents the absolute extreme, the theoretical peak value, if multiple rare factors align perfectly, including uniqueness, flawless condition, ironclad authentication, and two or more billionaire-level collectors determined to outbid each other, a scenario that has happened before in other collectible markets. And while most 1954 Wheat pennies are worth only a small premium over face value, the possibility that a single example could exist with unprecedented errors is what keeps collectors searching rolls, estate sales, and old jars of change. Because history has shown us time and time again that the most valuable coins were often overlooked for decades before being recognized for what they truly were, and authentication is critical in this conversation because claims of extreme value require verification by top-tier grading services, metallurgical analysis, and expert consensus, and without that, a coin remains a curiosity rather than a legend. But if such a coin were certified, published, and accepted by the numismatic community, it would instantly become one of the most famous coins on Earth, displayed at major shows, written about in books, and whispered about in collector circles for generations. And this is why the 1954 Wheat penny continues to fascinate, because it sits at the intersection of possibility and mystery, a reminder that even in an era we think we understand completely, there are still secrets waiting to be uncovered. And every time you see that familiar Lincoln portrait and wheat reverse, you're holding a piece of American history that could, under the rarest of circumstances, defy all expectations, turn copper into legend, and prove that sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories of all. Next, 1946 Wheat penny. Everyday pocket change turns into legendary discoveries, and forgotten since rewrite history. And today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in American numismatics, the incredible 1946 Wheat penny that some collectors believe could reach an astonishing value of up to $233 million because of rare errors, minting mistakes, and extraordinary possibilities that pushed this humble copper cent into the realm of mythic treasure. A story that begins just after World War II, when the United States Mint resumed full peacetime production and subtle changes in metal composition, mint equipment wear, and rush production created the perfect storm for rare anomalies to slip through unnoticed. Because the 1946 Wheat penny was struck during a transitional period when the mint was still adjusting machinery that had been heavily used during wartime, dies were often overused, and quality control was not as strict as it would later become, opening the door to some of the most dramatic errors ever imagined, including doubled dies that show dramatic separation in the date, lettering, and motto, off-metal strikes where a penny may have been struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, and wrong alloy compositions that accidentally replicated earlier wartime metals or experimental copper mixes, all of which fuel speculation that a perfect storm error example could be one of the rarest coins on Earth. And when collectors talk about the $233 million valuation, they are not talking about an average circulated cent but about a theoretical ultra-unique specimen combining multiple high-impact errors such as a bold obverse double die with full separation, a dramatic die rotation, and an off-metal strike on a bronze or experimental alloy blank that was never meant to be used in 1946. A combination so unlikely that it would instantly become a one-of-a-kind museum-level artifact, because the value of rare coins is driven not just by age but by rarity, demand, historical context, and uniqueness, and the 1946 Wheat Penny sits at the crossroads of all four, especially when considering that most people overlook post-war pennies entirely, assuming all valuable wheat cents must come from earlier decades, which makes the hunt for 1946 errors even more exciting since many may still be hiding in old jars, inherited collections, or forgotten rolls, and one of the most discussed possibilities involves a 1946 penny struck on a leftover 1943 bronze planchet or an experimental copper alloy planchet that was never officially documented, a scenario that sounds impossible until collectors remember that similar mistakes have occurred before, such as the famous 1943 bronze cents and 1944 steel cents, proving that transitional metal errors are very real and can command millions. And if a confirmed 1946 wheat penny surfaced with an undocumented metal composition verified by professional metallurgical testing, its value would be impossible to predict because it would rewrite what collectors know about post-war mint operations. While another powerful error category lies in extreme double dies created when the die received multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, resulting in dramatic doubling that can be seen with the naked eye, especially on the date and the word Liberty, and while minor doubling is common. A strong double die with full separation and pristine preservation would elevate a 1946 cent into elite territory, particularly if paired with deep original luster and no circulation wear, because condition is everything in the upper tiers of coin valuation. And then there are repunched mint marks on the 1946D and 1946S wheat pennies, which occurred when mint marks were added to dies by hand, sometimes multiple times, creating overlapping or shifted impressions that today are highly sought after by error specialists. And while most repunched mint marks add modest premiums, an extreme example, combined with other errors, could push a coin into legendary status, especially when paired with a misaligned die strike that causes part of the design to be missing or doubled at the rim, further adding to its uniqueness. And collectors also look closely at die cracks, retained cuds, and dramatic lamination errors where the metal peels or splits due to improper alloy mixing, because these flaws tell the story of the minting process itself and transform a simple penny into a historical artifact. And when multiple errors appear together on the same coin, the value multiplies exponentially rather than incrementally, which is why the idea of a $233 million 1946 wheat penny is rooted not in fantasy, but in the extreme upper limits of numismatic possibility, the kind of discovery that would shake the collecting world, dominate headlines, and become the centerpiece of auctions for generations, especially if the coin could be traced to a sealed mint bag or original roll, providing unquestionable provenance. And it is important to understand that the coin market thrives on stories as much as statistics, and a post-war penny emerging with unprecedented characteristics would capture global attention, drawing in not only coin collectors, but museums, historians, and private investors looking for irreplaceable tangible assets. And this is why collectors are urged to examine every 1946 wheat penny carefully, checking weight, magnetism, strike quality, alignment, and design details, because what appears ordinary at first glance could hide microscopic clues that point to a once-in-a-lifetime error, and even circulated examples with unusual features should never be dismissed, since some of the greatest discoveries in numismatic history were pulled from circulation decades after they were minted, unnoticed by millions of hands, and beyond errors. Condition rarity plays a massive role. As a perfectly preserved 1946 wheat penny with blazing red surfaces, full mint luster, and sharp details graded at the highest levels could already command significant value. And when you add even a single major error to that level of preservation, the price trajectory becomes nearly vertical, and collectors also consider the psychology of the market, where the first confirmed example of an unprecedented error often sells for exponentially more than later discoveries. Meaning the very first verified ultra-rare 1946 wheat penny could achieve a record-breaking price simply because it is first, and this is how theoretical valuations like $233 million emerge, not as fixed price tags but as representations of potential in an open market driven by rarity, desire, and competition among elite buyers. And as you search through your wheat pennies, remember that the 1946 cent represents a bridge between wartime and modern America. A coin struck at a moment of global transition, making any anomaly from that year especially meaningful, because it reflects the human element of minting, the rushed decisions, worn equipment, and experimental processes that no official report ever fully documented, and that mystery is what keeps collectors searching, hoping, and believing that the next legendary discovery could be sitting quietly in a box, a drawer, or a forgotten roll, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. And if a 1946 wheat penny ever does emerge combining multiple extreme errors with flawless preservation and verified authenticity, it would not just be worth big money, it would redefine what collectors believe is possible, turning a 1-cent coin into a cultural and historical icon valued not just in dollars but in legacy. And that is why this humble post-war penny continues to fuel imaginations, inspire searches, and keep the dream alive that one extraordinary mistake can change everything. Next, 1952 D wheat penny. Everyday pocket change turns into jaw-dropping treasure stories. And today we're diving into one of the most mysterious and talked about Lincoln wheat cents ever imagined, the 1952 D wheat penny, a humble 1-cent coin that in legendary condition, and with the right combination of rare minting mistakes has been rumored in collector circles to reach a staggering value as high as $112 million. And while that number represents the extreme upper edge of possibility rather than a routine sale, the fascinating part is understanding how a common date penny from the Denver Mint could even be mentioned in the same sentence as life-changing money, because the world of error coins is full of surprises where history, human mistakes, and pure chance collide in ways that collectors dream about every single day. And the 1952 D wheat penny sits right at the intersection of that dream, because it was struck during a time when the U.S. Mint was operating at high speed to meet post-war demand, increasing the chances for die wear, misalignment, metal preparation flaws, and accidental combinations of errors that normally should never leave the mint, yet sometimes did, slipping unnoticed into circulation where they could survive for decades before being rediscovered. To understand why this coin is so fascinating, you first have to picture the Denver Mint in 1952 producing millions upon millions of Lincoln cents with the classic wheat ears on the reverse, using steel-backed copper planchets that had to be precisely rolled, cut, annealed, washed, and struck. And when any one of those steps went wrong, the result could be an error that multiplied the coin's value thousands or even millions of times over, especially if more than one error appeared on the same coin, which is where the truly extreme valuations begin to make sense. One of the most important possibilities tied to the 1952 D wheat penny is a dramatic off-metal error, such as being struck on a wrong planchet intended for another denomination or even another year. And collectors know that wrong planchet cents already sell for massive sums. But if a confirmed 1952 D wheat cent were discovered struck on a rare alloy not authorized for cents at that time, especially one tied to experimental or leftover wartime metal, the numismatic world would erupt, because that would represent a unique surviving artifact of mint experimentation or material mishandling, something museums would compete to own. Another powerful value driver is a dramatic double die error, where the coin was struck by a die that received a misaligned hub impression, creating strong doubling in the date, mint mark, or lettering. And while minor doubling is fairly common, extreme, crisp, spread doubling that affects multiple design elements is extraordinarily rare. And if such a double die appeared on a 1952 D wheat penny in uncirculated or proof-like condition, the price could climb into astronomical territory due to the combination of condition rarity and visual impact that collectors crave. Then, there are repunched mint marks, which were common during the era when mint marks were punched by hand into dies. And while many repunched mint marks exist, the truly valuable ones are bold, dramatic, and paired with other errors, such as die cracks or rotated dies, turning a simple curiosity into a once-in-a-generation discovery. Die cracks themselves tell another part of the story, because as dies wore out under the pressure of repeated strikes, cracks could form and grow, eventually creating retained cut errors or massive breaks that distorted the design. And if a 1952 Wheat Penny shows a large retained cut or a spectacular die break crossing Lincoln's portrait or the wheat ears, it becomes a visual record of the mint pushing equipment beyond its limits, something collectors love because it captures the exact moment before a die failed completely. One of the most legendary scenarios involves a 1952 Wheat Penny struck with multiple errors at once, such as an off-center strike combined with a broad strike and a clipped planchet, which would require several things to go wrong in sequence, making such a coin nearly impossible to replicate. And it's these one-of-one combinations that fuel the highest hypothetical valuations, because uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value when wealthy collectors are competing. Another possibility that excites collectors is a wrong-year die usage, where an older or misdated die was accidentally used or altered incorrectly, creating subtle but undeniable anomalies in the date itself. And while these are extremely rare, documented examples from other years prove that such mistakes did occur, and if one were conclusively tied to a 1952 Wheat Penny, it would instantly become a centerpiece of American numismatics. Condition plays an enormous role as well, because most wheat pennies from circulation are worn, but a pristine mint state example with blazing original luster, sharp strike, and no post-mint damage can multiply value exponentially, and when you combine top-tier condition with a major error, the value curve doesn't just rise, it explodes. Which is why a theoretical $112 million valuation is even discussed among advanced collectors as the absolute ceiling for a perfect storm coin. There is also the intriguing possibility of a transitional error, where a coin was struck during a change in materials or processes, and although 1952 wasn't officially a transition year like 1943 or 1944, leftover or experimental materials could still theoretically appear, especially during times when the mint was testing alloys for durability and cost. And any documentation or metallurgical analysis confirming such an anomaly would turn a simple cent into a historical artifact. The story of the 1952 Wheat Penny is also about survival, because even if such an error was created, it had to escape detection, avoid being melted, survive decades of circulation, and then be preserved well enough to still show its features clearly, and that chain of survival is incredibly fragile, which is why so few legendary error coins exist today. Collectors also look closely at strike quality, because weak strikes, missing design elements, or partially filled dies can create ghost-like images that are both eerie and valuable, and when these appear alongside strong errors, they add another layer of intrigue that drives bidding wars. Authentication is critical in this world, because claims of million-dollar pennies require expert verification, metallurgical testing, and die study, and only coins that pass that scrutiny can achieve elite status, but once verified, they become legends almost overnight, featured in auctions, articles, and museum displays. The fascination with the 1952 Wheat Penny isn't just about money, it's about the idea that history is hiding in plain sight, that a coin you might overlook could carry the fingerprints of a rushed mint worker, a worn-out die, or a momentary lapse in quality control that froze time in copper, and that idea keeps collectors searching rolls, jars, and inherited collections with hope and excitement. Stories of record-breaking prices fuel that excitement, inspiring new generations to learn about minting processes, error diagnostics, and grading standards, because knowledge is the key to recognizing treasure when you see it. Even if a $112 million example has yet to publicly surface, the fact that the conditions for such a coin are theoretically possible keeps the legend alive, and every newly discovered error adds another chapter to the ongoing story of American coinage. So the next time you come across a wheat penny dated 1952 with a small d beneath the date, take a closer look, examine the surfaces, the lettering, the metal, and the alignment, because while most will be ordinary, the extraordinary only reveals itself to those who pay attention, and that is the real magic of coin collecting, the thrill of discovery, the connection to history, and the possibility that somewhere out there, a tiny copper cent is waiting to change a life forever. Next, 1958 D Wheat Penny. Get comfortable because today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and controversial penny stories ever told in American coin collecting, a story that has collectors checking their pockets, magnifying glasses in hand, wondering if a simple brown Lincoln cent could secretly be worth a jaw-dropping $53 million. And yes, we are talking about the 1958 D Wheat Penny, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary, even boring to some, yet beneath that familiar wheat reverse end Lincoln portrait lies a storm of mystery, minting chaos, and legendary error possibilities that have turned this humble 1-cent coin into a centerpiece of high-end numismatic speculation. And as we explore this together here on the Coins Explorer, remember that history is full of impossible discoveries that only became valuable because someone paid attention when everyone else looked away. And the 1958 D Wheat Penny is a perfect example of how the final year of an iconic coin design collided with human error, mechanical imperfection, and a mint under pressure to produce millions of coins quickly, setting the stage for mistakes that could elevate a single penny into the realm of unimaginable wealth. Because 1958 was the last year the wheat reverse was used before the Lincoln Memorial design took over in 1959, and the Denver Mint was running at full capacity to meet circulation demand, striking enormous quantities of cents with worn dies, hurried inspections, and little time for corrections, which is exactly the environment where rare errors are born. And while most 1958 D Wheat pennies are common, the extreme values come from very specific and very rare combinations of mistakes, including dramatic double dies, off-metal strikes, transitional planchet errors, die clashes, wrong alloy compositions, and even experimental strikes that may have slipped out unnoticed. And when collectors talk about the $53 million valuation, they are not talking about a normal coin pulled from a bank roll. They are talking about a theoretical perfect storm error coin, a once-in-a-lifetime specimen that combines multiple minting anomalies into a single surviving example, the kind of coin that would rewrite auction records and force grading services, museums, and wealthy collectors into a bidding war unlike anything seen before, starting with double die errors, which are among the most famous and valuable mistakes in U.S. coinage. And while the most well-known double die cent of this era is the 1958 Philadelphia issue with strong doubling on the motto and date, collectors believe that a small number of Denver dies may also have experienced hub misalignment during preparation, creating subtle to dramatic doubling that went largely unnoticed due to the frenzy of production. And a strong double die obverse on a 1958 D Wheat penny showing clear separation on Lincoln's profile, the date, and the lettering could instantly elevate the coin into elite status, especially if the doubling is bold, consistent, and confirmed by top grading authorities. And then, there are off-metal strikes, which occur when a coin is struck on the wrong planchet, and this is where the story becomes even more exciting, because in the late 1950s the U.S. Mint was experimenting with different metal compositions in preparation for future changes, and leftover planchets from previous years or experimental batches could have been present in the mint environment, meaning a 1958 D Wheat penny struck on a silver planchet, a brass planchet, or even an aluminum test blank would be an absolute sensation, not just rare but historically significant, and a confirmed off-metal 1958 D Wheat cent with full details and mint state surfaces would be priceless, especially if the metal composition could be scientifically verified and traced to mint experimentation, pushing values into the multi-million-dollar range on its own, and when combined with other errors the valuation explodes. Then we have transitional errors, which occur when a coin is struck using elements intended for a different design or year, and since 1958 was the transition year between the Wheat reverse and the Lincoln Memorial reverse, rumors have long circulated about mule coins or hybrid strikes, where a Wheat reverse die may have been paired incorrectly or modified during testing. And while no officially confirmed 1958 D Wheat Memorial mule has surfaced publicly, the possibility alone fuels intense speculation, because the discovery of such a coin would be one of the greatest numismatic finds in history, immediately pushing its value into tens of millions due to its uniqueness, historical importance, and extreme rarity. And then there are die errors like die clashes, cuts, retained cuts, and massive die breaks, which become more common when dies are overused, as they often were in the late 1950s. And a dramatic die break on a 1958 D Wheat penny that distorts Lincoln's portrait or dramatically alters the reverse design could make the coin visually stunning and highly collectible, especially if it is a late-stage die failure that clearly shows the stress and damage of the minting process. And collectors love these coins because they tell a story of the mint machinery literally breaking down under pressure. And while many die breaks are modest, an extreme example combined with other errors could contribute to an astronomical valuation. Another factor that plays a major role in the $53 million conversation is condition, because even the rarest error loses value if it is heavily worn or damaged. And the ultimate dream coin would be a 1958 D Wheat penny with multiple errors preserved in mint state condition, with full original luster, sharp details, and no signs of circulation, suggesting it was discovered immediately or set aside by a mint worker or early collector who recognized something unusual. And mint state error coins from this era are exponentially rarer than circulated examples, which dramatically increases demand and value. And we cannot ignore the possibility of wrong mint mark errors, repunched mint marks, or misplaced mint marks, which were more common before mint marks were added to the master hub. And a dramatically repunched D mint mark on a 1958 Wheat penny, especially one showing clear separation and multiple impressions, would be highly desirable, and if paired with other anomalies, it would further enhance the coin's uniqueness. And then there is the alloy composition itself, because while 1958 cents were intended to be struck in the standard bronze composition, variations in copper, tin, and zinc percentages could result in unusual color, weight, and magnetic properties, and an out-of-tolerance alloy error that can be scientifically proven would add another layer of intrigue and value, especially if it suggests experimental or accidental mixing of metals at the Denver Mint. And all of these possibilities together form the foundation of why collectors believe a single 1958 D Wheat penny could theoretically reach a $53 million valuation, not because every example is valuable, but because the right example, the perfect storm coin, would be irreplaceable. And when you combine rarity with legend, history, and the emotional thrill of discovery, prices become almost secondary. Because ultra-wealthy collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying stories, status, and the chance to own something no one else on Earth can ever have. And history has shown us that coins once dismissed as myths later emerged to shatter records, like the 1943 bronze cent or the 1913 Liberty nickel, both of which were once considered impossible until proven real. And the same logic keeps the dream alive for the 1958 D Wheat penny, inspiring collectors to check every roll, every inherited jar, every forgotten drawer, because the next great discovery often comes from the most unexpected places. And even if the odds are slim, the potential reward is life-changing, which is why this penny continues to capture imaginations across the collecting world, reminding us that the smallest denomination can sometimes carry the biggest surprises. And as long as coins are struck by human hands and imperfect machines, the possibility of extraordinary mistakes will always exist, waiting quietly to be found by someone curious enough to look closely. And that is the true magic of coin collecting, the idea that history, chance, and value can all collide in the palm of your hand. Next, 1951's Wheat Penny. It's great to have you here as we dive into another incredible story from the world of pocket change where ordinary pennies can hide extraordinary secrets. And today we're talking about the legendary 1951's Wheat Penny, a coin that at first glance looks like nothing more than a simple copper cent, but under the right circumstances has been rumored, discussed, and dreamed about as a coin that could reach values as high as $25 million because of a rare combination of minting errors, production mistakes, historical timing, and unbelievable what-if possibilities that continue to fuel excitement among collectors and everyday people alike. Because the 1951's Wheat Penny was struck at the San Francisco Mint during a time when America was still adjusting to post-war realities, metal supplies were tightly controlled, minting equipment was heavily used, and quality control was not always perfect, creating an environment where unusual errors could slip through unnoticed. And one of the most valuable possibilities associated with this coin involves off-metal strikes, where a 1951's Wheat Penny could have been accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even another metal entirely, such as bronze variations with incorrect alloy composition, experimental planchets, or leftover blanks from previous years. And if a genuine 1951's Wheat Penny were discovered struck on a silver, brass, or transitional alloy planchet with full authentication and provenance, the value would instantly skyrocket into legendary territory, especially if the coin remained in high-grade condition. Another factor that drives the staggering valuation rumors surrounding this penny is the possibility of a double die obverse or reverse that is far more dramatic than the commonly known minor doubling seen on many cents, because a strong hub doubling affecting the date, the word liberty, or the wheat ears could create a visually striking and extremely rare variety. And if such a double die were paired with the San Francisco Mint mark and preserved in near mint state, collectors would fiercely compete for ownership, pushing prices into unimaginable territory. And then there is the mysterious and highly sought-after repunched mint mark error, which during this era was created by hand-punching the mint mark into the die, meaning mistakes were far more likely, and a bold, clearly visible repunched mint mark, especially one with multiple impressions or unusual positioning, could elevate a standard penny into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And when you combine that with other errors like die cracks, die breaks, or retained cut formations that dramatically alter the appearance of the coin, the uniqueness factor becomes overwhelming, because elite collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying stories, anomalies, and pieces of history that can never be replicated. And the 1951's Wheat Penny sits at the crossroads of that fascination. Another incredible mistake that could turn this coin into a multi-million-dollar treasure is a wrong year or overdate scenario, where remnants of a previous date appear beneath the 1951 numerals due to improper die preparation, creating a ghostly layering effect that proves the die was reused or improperly polished. And such errors are extraordinarily rare for this year in mint, which is exactly why even the possibility keeps collectors searching through rolls and collections decades later. And then there is the dream scenario that truly fuels the $25 million valuation rumors, the possibility of a mule coin, where the obverse of a wheat penny is paired with an incorrect reverse or mismatched die not intended for that year or denomination. And while no confirmed example has surfaced publicly, the theoretical existence of such a coin is enough to keep numismatists talking. Because if one were found, authenticated, and graded, it would instantly become one of the most famous coins in American history. And we cannot forget about strike errors, such as extreme off-center strikes where the date and mint mark remain visible while a large portion of the design is missing, or broad strikes where the coin spreads beyond its normal boundaries due to the absence of a collar, creating a distorted and eye-catching piece that defies expectations. And while many off-center coins are worth modest sums, A dramatic error combined with the 1951's date in pristine condition could command astronomical prices, especially when paired with strong luster and minimal wear. Another major value driver is condition rarity, because while millions of 1951's Wheat Pennies were minted, very few survived in top-tier mint state grades, especially with full original red color, sharp details on Lincoln's portrait, and clean wheat lines on the reverse. And when you factor in the possibility of a high-grade example with a rare error, the value multiplies exponentially, because collectors at the highest level are not limited by budgets, they are driven by competition and legacy, and owning a unique or nearly unique coin becomes a statement rather than a purchase, and the historical context of 1951 also adds to the mystique, as the Korean War era placed pressure on mint operations, increased production demands, and sometimes resulted in rushed processes that allowed unusual coins to slip through quality checks. And these conditions are precisely what create the environment for legendary errors to exist, even if only a handful or possibly a single example ever emerged. And over the years, stories have circulated about mysterious pennies found in old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten bank rolls that turn out to be astonishing rarities, reinforcing the belief that treasures are still out there waiting to be discovered. And the psychology of rarity plays a huge role in valuation, because when a coin is rumored to exist but has not been publicly documented, its hypothetical value becomes limitless, driven by imagination, speculation, and the willingness of collectors to pay whatever it takes to secure something no one else has. And the 1951's Wheat Penny embodies that sense of mystery, because while standard examples are affordable, the idea that a catastrophic mint error or experimental strike could exist keeps hope alive for treasure hunters everywhere, and authentication is key in this world, because a genuine multi-million-dollar coin would need to pass the scrutiny of top grading services, metallurgical analysis, die study comparisons, and provenance research to prove its legitimacy beyond any doubt, and once verified, the auction world would erupt, with headlines, record-breaking bids, and intense media coverage, transforming a simple penny into a cultural phenomenon. And this is why the 1951's Wheat Penny continues to be searched for, discussed, and dreamed about, because it represents the ultimate thrill of coin collecting, the idea that something so small, so common, and so easily overlooked could hold the power to change a life forever. And whether or not a $25 million example ever surfaces, the pursuit itself is what keeps collectors engaged, motivated, and passionate, checking dates, examining mint marks, studying errors, and passing the curiosity down through generations. And every time you look at a Wheat Penny dated 1951 with that small S beneath the date, you are holding a piece of possibility, a reminder that history, mistakes, and chance sometimes collide in the most unexpected ways, and that somewhere, perhaps still hidden in a forgotten collection or resting quietly in a roll of old cents, the most extraordinary 1951's Wheat Penny of all could be waiting to be discovered, turning a humble coin into a legend worth millions, and proving once again that in the world of numismatics, even a single cent can carry the weight of a fortune. Next, 1951 Wheat Penny. Welcome to a journey into one of the most fascinating and mysterious Lincoln Wheat Pennies ever discussed, because today we are diving deep into the legendary 1951 Wheat Penny, a coin that at first glance looks ordinary but in rare and extraordinary circumstances has been linked to values rumored as high as $33 million. And whether you are a seasoned collector, a curious treasure hunter, or someone who just found an old penny in a drawer and wondered if it could change your life, this story is designed to pull you in, spark your imagination, and open your eyes to how tiny minting mistakes, overlooked errors, and rare possibilities can transform a simple one-cent coin into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. So settle in as we explore how the 1951 Wheat Penny became one of the most talked-about coins in numismatic lore, and why collectors around the world continue to search for it with hope and excitement. because the year 1951 sits at a fascinating point in American history when the United States Mint was producing massive quantities of Lincoln cents to support a booming post-war economy, yet even with improved technology and experience, the minting process was still far from perfect, and those imperfections are exactly where extreme value can be born. Since the 1951 wheat penny was struck at multiple mints including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each facility operating with its own dies, pressures, planchets, and quality controls, creating countless opportunities for subtle and dramatic mistakes to slip through unnoticed. And while most 1951 wheat pennies are worth only a few cents in circulated condition, the true magic lies in the tiny fraction that exhibit rare errors such as dramatic double die strikes where the date or lettering appears doubled due to misalignment during the die creation process. And in extreme examples, this doubling can be bold, thick, and unmistakable, causing collectors to stop in their tracks because true doubled dies from this era are fiercely sought after and can command staggering prices when confirmed and graded. But that is only the beginning of the possibilities, because off-metal errors also play a crucial role in pushing theoretical values into the multi-million-dollar range. As a 1951 wheat penny accidentally struck on a wrong planchet, such as silver intended for dimes, or even foreign metal stock, would instantly become one of the rarest Lincoln cents known. And the rarity of such an error, combined with pristine condition and perfect documentation, could elevate its value into legendary territory, especially if it were a unique or one-of-a-kind survivor. And then there are transitional errors and experimental strikes, which are often whispered about rather than widely documented, where a coin may have been struck using test materials, incorrect alloy mixes, or leftover planchets from previous years. And while these pieces were never meant to leave the mint, history has shown that some did escape into circulation, quietly hiding for decades before being rediscovered and authenticated. And when a coin represents an error that challenges what we know about mint records and production standards, collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for the privilege of owning such a piece. And this is where the $33 million discussion truly takes shape, not as a common price, but as a theoretical ceiling for the most extreme and perfect example imaginable, because condition plays an enormous role as well, and a flawless mint state 1951 wheat penny with a dramatic error would be exponentially more valuable than the same coin in worn condition, since sharp details, original luster, and untouched surfaces create an irresistible combination for elite collectors and museums. And beyond visible errors, there are also die varieties such as repunched mint marks, die cracks, cuds, and retained die breaks, which may look insignificant to an untrained eye but can signal a rare stage in a die's life that was only used briefly before being retired, meaning only a small number of coins were struck with that specific defect. And when multiple rare features appear on a single coin, the value does not simply add up, it multiplies, because collectors view such pieces as lightning striking twice, or even 3 times. And the 1951 wheat penny is particularly intriguing because its massive production numbers paradoxically increase the chance that a few extraordinary mistakes occurred, even if only a handful survived. And over the years, stories have surfaced of collectors finding unusual 1951 cents in old rolls, inherited collections, or estate sales, sometimes dismissed at first as damage or anomalies until professional examination revealed something far more special, and these discoveries fuel the ongoing belief that more treasures are still out there waiting to be found. Especially since many people overlook wheat pennies entirely, or spend them without a second thought. And another powerful factor that can elevate value into the stratosphere is provenance, because a coin with a documented history, such as being part of a famous collection or discovered in a historically significant context, carries a narrative that collectors deeply value. And when a rare 1951 wheat penny is paired with a compelling story, ironclad authentication, and top-tier grading, it becomes more than money. It becomes an artifact, a symbol of chance, error, and survival. And the psychology of collecting cannot be ignored either, because at the highest levels of numismatics, ultra-wealthy collectors are not simply buying metal, they are competing for prestige, uniqueness, and the thrill of owning something no one else can. And this competitive environment is exactly how record-breaking prices are achieved, sometimes far beyond what traditional price guides would ever suggest. And the idea of a $33 million 1951 wheat penny exists in this realm of extreme rarity, perfect condition, historic importance, and fierce demand colliding at the same moment. And even though most people will never encounter such an example, the possibility itself is what keeps collectors searching rolls, checking change, and examining old jars of pennies with renewed excitement, because history has repeatedly proven that extraordinary coins can surface in ordinary places. And the 1951 wheat penny remains a powerful reminder that value is not always obvious at first glance, that mistakes can become masterpieces, and that a single overlooked detail can turn a humble cent into a life-changing discovery. So whether you are actively hunting for rare coins or simply fascinated by the stories behind them, the legend of the 1951 wheat penny stands as one of the most captivating examples of how errors, mistakes, and minting possibilities can create unimaginable worth. And as long as there are coins left unchecked and collections yet to be explored, the dream of finding that once-in-a-lifetime penny will continue to inspire collectors around the world to keep looking, keep learning, and never underestimate the potential hiding in plain sight. Next, 1945 wheat penny. Hidden history meets unbelievable value. Today we are diving into one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories in American coin collecting, the 1945 wheat penny, a coin that many people have held in their hands without realizing that under extremely rare circumstances and extraordinary error combinations it can reach legendary valuations rumored as high as $21 million. And while that number represents the absolute extreme end of theoretical and private collector speculation, the story behind why a simple 1-cent coin from the final year of World War II can command life-changing money is packed with minting mistakes, transitional metal mysteries, die errors, historical timing, and once-in-a-generation possibilities that keep collectors searching every day. Because the 1945 wheat penny was struck at a moment when the United States Mint was still recovering from wartime production pressures, material shortages, worn equipment, rushed output, and changing metal compositions, all of which created the perfect storm for errors that should never have left the mint but occasionally did. And to understand how such a coin could become so valuable, you have to understand that 1945 wheat pennies were supposed to be made of bronze, specifically a copper alloy restored after the steel cents of 1943, yet the chaos of wartime transitions meant that leftover steel planchets, experimental alloy blanks, and even foreign metal contaminants sometimes slipped into the production line, creating off-metal strikes that today are among the most valuable errors in American numismatics. And the most famous and valuable possibility is a genuine 1945 wheat penny struck on a steel planchet, a coin that technically should not exist because steel cents were officially discontinued 2 years earlier, yet due to human error, leftover blanks, or misfiled inventory, a tiny number may have been struck, and if authenticated, such a coin would instantly become one of the rarest Lincoln cents ever produced, with values that could reach into the millions depending on condition, provenance, and market demand. But steel is only the beginning, because the 1945 wheat penny is also known for dramatic die errors caused by overworked and damaged dies, including doubled dies where letters, numbers, or Lincoln's profile appear doubled due to misalignment during the die creation process, and a strong doubled die obverse from 1945 showing clear separation on the date. Liberty, or In God We Trust, would be a monumental discovery, especially in high grade, because wartime dies were often reused beyond their intended lifespan, increasing the chances of doubling, distortion, and deformation. And then there are repunched mint marks on 1945D and 1945S wheat pennies, where the mint mark was punched into the die multiple times at slightly different angles, creating overlapping or shadowed mint marks that collectors prize. And while repunched mint marks are more common than steel strikes, the most dramatic examples with bold separation and pristine surfaces can still command astonishing prices, especially when paired with other errors. And error stacking is where values can explode, because a single coin showing multiple mistakes such as a double die combined with an off-metal strike or a broad strike can become a one-of-a-kind artifact. And speaking of broad strikes, 1945 wheat pennies struck without a retaining collar can display unusually wide rims and distorted lettering, and when combined with sharp details and minimal circulation wear, these coins demonstrate how minting failures can turn ordinary cents into museum-quality rarities. And then, there are off-center strikes where the design is misaligned on the planchet, sometimes dramatically so, revealing blank metal on one side and partial designs on the other. And while minor off-center strikes are relatively affordable, extreme off-center errors that still show the full date and mint mark are highly sought after, especially from historically significant years like 1945, which marked the end of a global conflict and the return of peacetime production. And history matters deeply to collectors because coins are time capsules, and a 1945 wheat penny carries the emotional weight of victory, sacrifice, and transition, making rare examples from this year even more desirable. But the errors don't stop there, because cracked dies, retained cut errors, and massive die breaks are frequently seen on late wartime cents, and a dramatic cud where a chunk of the die broke away leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin can add tremendous value, especially when the break disrupts Lincoln's portrait or the wheat stalks on the reverse. And then, there are wrong planchet errors where a 1945 penny may have been struck on a planchet intended for another denomination entirely, such as a dime or foreign coin blank, resulting in incorrect weight, size, and metal composition. And these wrong planchet strikes are among the most difficult errors to authenticate but also among the most valuable when proven genuine. And in extremely rare cases a 1945 wheat penny may exhibit transitional alloy characteristics, such as unusual copper color, incorrect weight, or trace elements from experimental metals, because the mint was constantly testing alloys to improve durability and reduce costs. And experimental pieces were not always perfectly segregated from regular production, and even a slight deviation in metal composition can dramatically increase value when verified by professional grading services, and condition plays a massive role as well, because most wheat pennies were heavily circulated, but a 1945 wheat penny with a major error preserved in mint state condition with original luster, sharp details, and no cleaning can multiply its value exponentially. And when you combine rarity, error severity, historical importance, and exceptional preservation, you begin to understand how collectors and investors can justify multi-million-dollar valuations for singular examples, especially when only one or two are known to exist. And the market for elite error coins operates differently from typical coin collecting because these pieces often sell privately, quietly, and far from public auction records, meaning their true prices may never be fully disclosed, fueling rumors and legendary figures like the $21 million valuation associated with a hypothetical perfect storm 1945 error cent. And what keeps this story alive is the fact that many 1945 wheat pennies are still sitting in jars, drawers, inherited collections, and forgotten boxes, because millions were minted and most people never imagined they could be worth more than face value. And yet, history has proven again and again that once in a while an ordinary coin reveals an extraordinary secret. And that possibility is what drives collectors to examine every detail under magnification, checking weight with precision scales, testing magnetism, studying die markers, and comparing known authentic examples, because one overlooked detail can be the difference between a common cent and a generational treasure. And while the odds are incredibly small, they are not zero, and the 1945 wheat penny remains one of the most exciting years to search because it sits at the crossroads of war and peace, old materials and new processes, rush production, and human error, and for those who understand what to look for, the hunt itself becomes as valuable as the coin, because the thrill of discovery, the connection to history, and the dream that a single cent could change your life is what makes numismatics so powerful. And as long as there are unexplored collections and unsearched pennies in circulation, the legend of the 1945 wheat penny and its multimillion-dollar possibilities will continue to inspire collectors around the world to keep looking, keep learning, and keep believing that the next incredible find could be waiting in the most unexpected place. Next, 1944 wheat penny. Step into a fascinating journey through one of the most mysterious and talked about coins in American history, because today we are diving deep into the incredible story of the 1944 wheat penny, a humble 1-cent coin that under the rarest circumstances has been linked to values climbing as high as $19 million. And while most people would pass this coin without a second thought, collectors know that hidden within certain examples are extraordinary errors, minting mistakes, and historical accidents that can transform a simple copper cent into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. And as we explore this story together, imagine holding a small piece of metal that carries wartime history, human error, and extreme rarity all in one, because the year 1944 sits at a crucial moment in United States history when World War II was still raging, metal shortages were severe, and the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to produce coinage quickly and efficiently for a growing economy. Which is exactly why this year became a breeding ground for some of the most famous and valuable minting mistakes ever discovered. And at the center of this legend is the unexpected composition errors that occurred when the mint transitioned back to copper after striking steel cents in 1943, since in 1943 pennies were made from zinc-coated steel to conserve copper for the war effort. But when 1944 arrived, the mint returned to using copper alloy planchets, often recycled from shell casings. Yet, in the chaos of production, a small number of leftover steel planchets from the previous year remained trapped in the machinery, and these planchets were accidentally struck with 1944 wheat penny dies, creating what collectors now consider one of the rarest transitional errors in American numismatics, a 1944 steel wheat penny. And while most 1944 pennies are copper and worth only a small premium depending on condition, a genuine 1944 steel cent is in a completely different universe, with only a handful confirmed to exist, each one carefully studied, authenticated, and fiercely contested by elite collectors. And it is these coins that form the foundation of the multi-million-dollar valuations often discussed, because rarity alone is not enough. It is the combination of historical context, accidental creation, extreme scarcity, and intense collector demand that pushes these values into staggering territory. And beyond steel planchets, the 1944 wheat penny is also known for potential off-metal errors where the coin may have been struck on a foreign planchet or an experimental alloy, which would immediately elevate its importance, because off-metal strikes prove that something went dramatically wrong inside the mint. And when such a mistake survives circulation and is discovered decades later, it becomes a tangible link to a moment of unnoticed chaos on the minting floor. And then there are double die errors, another category that can significantly raise the value of a 1944 wheat penny, especially when the doubling is strong and clearly visible on the date, lettering, or wheat ears on the reverse, since double dies occur when the die itself receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, meaning every coin struck from that die carries the same doubling, and collectors prize these coins because they represent a repeatable mistake rather than a one-off strike anomaly. And in the case of the 1944 penny, certain double die obverse and reverse varieties have been documented, and while most are modestly valuable compared to the steel error, exceptionally strong examples in high grade can still command impressive prices, especially when paired with pristine surfaces and full original luster. And speaking of surfaces, condition plays an enormous role in how far a 1944 wheat penny's value can climb. because coins that were never circulated and remain in mint state condition preserve every detail exactly as it left the press. And when such a coin also displays a rare error, the value multiplies dramatically, as collectors are not only buying rarity but also perfection. And another fascinating category of errors involves broad strikes and off-center strikes, which occur when the coin is not properly seated in the collar during striking, causing the metal to spread outward or the design to be partially missing. And while many off-center coins exist, finding one from 1944 with a dramatic misalignment and clear date can make it far more desirable, especially when combined with other anomalies like clipped planchets, which result from improper cutting of the metal strip before striking, leaving a curved or straight section missing from the coin. And then there are wrong planchet thickness errors, where a penny may appear unusually thin or thick, indicating it was struck on metal intended for a different denomination. And each of these mistakes tells a different story about how a single moment of mechanical failure created a coin that was never supposed to exist. And perhaps one of the most intriguing possibilities surrounding the $19 million valuation narrative is the idea of a unique specimen, a hypothetical perfect storm coin that combines multiple errors at once, such as a 1944 steel penny with doubling, pristine mint state preservation, and full authentication from top grading services. Because when collectors speak of record-breaking prices, they are often imagining or referencing coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of rarity, sometimes even unique pieces that stand alone in the entire numismatic record. And in auctions, these coins are not just purchased, they are battled over, with wealthy collectors, museums, and private investors pushing prices higher and higher because they understand that once such a coin enters a collection, it may not reappear for decades, if ever. And this scarcity creates a psychological urgency that drives values far beyond traditional price guides. And the 1944 Wheat Pennies allure is also amplified by the fact that millions of people actively search for it, checking jars, inherited collections, and estate holdings, hoping to discover a hidden treasure, which keeps the story alive and fuels constant interest. And while the odds are incredibly small, history has shown that remarkable discoveries do happen, with rare coins found in old boxes, drawers, and family keepsakes, untouched for generations. And this possibility, however slim, is what makes the 1944 Wheat Penny one of the most exciting coins to talk about, because it blurs the line between everyday pocket change and unimaginable wealth. And it also teaches an important lesson about numismatics, that value is not just about age, but about context, mistakes, survival, and demand. And the 1944 penny perfectly embodies this principle. As a coin born during wartime necessity, shaped by human oversight, and elevated by modern collector passion, and when people hear figures like $19 million, it captures the imagination, but behind that number is a complex web of factors that must align perfectly, including authentication, provenance, rarity confirmation, and market timing, because a coin is only worth what someone is willing to pay at that moment. And in the upper tiers of collecting, those moments can produce astonishing results. And whether or not most viewers will ever encounter such a coin, the story itself is valuable, because it encourages closer inspection, curiosity, and appreciation for the small details that define history. And as you look at any 1944 Wheat Penny in your possession, remember that every coin carries a story, but a select few carry legends, and those legends are forged not in gold or silver, but in mistakes that were never meant to survive, making the 1944 Wheat Penny not just a coin, but a symbol of how imperfection can sometimes become priceless. Last 1953 Wheat Penny. And another fascinating dive into the world of rare and extraordinary coins on the Coins Explorer channel. Today we are exploring one of the most coveted and astonishingly valuable coins in numismatic history, the 1953 Wheat Penny, a coin that might seem ordinary at first glance but carries within it a story of mistakes, minting errors, and sheer rarity that has propelled its value to an astounding $11 million, making it a holy grail for collectors and investors alike and an irresistible gem. For anyone passionate about coins and their histories, the 1953 Wheat Penny was minted in Denver, and while thousands of pennies were struck that year, only a few survived the test of time with the specific anomalies that make this coin priceless. The first factor contributing to its immense value is the occurrence of minting errors, which include misstrikes, double dies, off-center strikes, and die cracks. Each of these errors is a result of imperfections during the coin striking process. Whether it was a misalignment of the obverse and reverse dies, excessive pressure variations, or accidental strikes that caused the coin's design to be slightly off or duplicated in certain areas, these errors are incredibly rare because the U.S. Mint has stringent quality controls, meaning that only a handful of coins ever escape the production line with such noticeable mistakes. This rarity is further magnified when considering the passage of over 7 decades, during which many coins were lost, melted, or circulated to the point of where that makes these error coins unrecognizable. Another remarkable aspect of the 1953 Wheat Penny is the so-called small date/large date variation, a subtle but critical difference in the number styling that collectors hunt for obsessively. In some examples, the 3 in 1953 may appear slightly higher or lower than the 5, or thicker in font, which might seem trivial, but in the world of numismatics, these minute differences can multiply a coin's value exponentially because they represent a snapshot of historical minting processes. The coin's material composition also plays a role. The 1953 Wheat Penny was made primarily of copper, which was subject to alloy inconsistencies during that era, leading to variations in weight, color, and finish. Some coins may show a slightly reddish hue, while others have a darker, more brownish patina due to oxidation over the decades. These characteristics not only influence aesthetic appeal but also are indicators of authenticity and provenance, further enhancing their desirability. In addition to minting errors and physical anomalies, the historical context adds a layer of intrigue and value to this coin. 1953 was a post-World War II era, a time when the United States was adjusting production to meet peacetime needs, and pennies were struck in large numbers to satisfy everyday circulation. Yet somehow, a few coins emerged from this mass production with striking flaws, making them the exceptions that drive prices to millions in today's collector market. Provenance is another critical factor. Coins with documented ownership histories, certificates of authenticity, or those that have been graded by reputable numismatic organizations like PCGS or NGC tend to command higher prices. For the 1953 Wheat Penny, examples that have survived in near-perfect condition, perhaps uncirculated or with minimal wear, often feature grading scores such as MS65 or MS66, which dramatically increase their market value, whereas circulated or damaged examples, while still valuable, do not reach the astronomical figures of $11 million. Collectors are also fascinated by the types of errors seen on this coin, including repunchment marks, where the small d indicating Denver was accidentally struck more than once, sometimes slightly off-center, creating a doubled appearance, or die cracks that appear as thin lines running across the coin's face or rim, which, though unintentional, add a layer of uniqueness that cannot be replicated. Some coins even exhibit die clashes, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghostly impressions of the opposite design. All of these errors make each surviving coin a one-of-a-kind artifact of minting history. Market dynamics also play a significant role in establishing the $11 million valuation. Rarity alone does not guarantee such a price. Demand is equally crucial. The 1953 Wheat Penny has become a legendary coin in auction circles because collectors recognize that examples with these specific errors are extremely limited, often appearing only once in decades of trading, which generates intense bidding wars. further fueled by the coin's historical narrative and the prestige associated with owning such a rare piece. The excitement is amplified by the human fascination with mistakes and imperfections in otherwise standardized objects, in this case, the errors on the penny tell a story of the minting process, the people involved, and the mechanical unpredictability of mid-20th century coin production, which adds an emotional and historical value that transcends the metal itself. The condition, rarity, historical significance, and uniqueness of each era collectively explain why a single 1953 wheat penny can reach $11 million. And even slight variations in die errors or preservation status can mean the difference of millions in auction value. Moreover, collectors are often drawn to the possibilities that these coins represent for future discoveries. While only a handful of error coins have been verified, there is always the tantalizing chance that another uncirculated or previously unknown specimen exists in a private collection or forgotten stash, which keeps the market highly active and speculative. In addition, the coin serves as a teaching tool and a symbol of the broader fascination with numismatics, illustrating how meticulous observation, patience, and research can transform a common object into a multi-million-dollar treasure. Beyond just monetary value, the 1953 wheat penny is celebrated for its artistry and historical authenticity. The intricate details of Lincoln's portrait, the wheat stalks on the reverse, and the subtle imperfections from die errors make each coin a miniature canvas of American minting history. Collectors revel in studying these minute characteristics under magnification, sharing findings with fellow enthusiasts, and building a deep appreciation for the craft and serendipity involved in coin production. For investors, this coin is also a tangible asset, a rare object whose scarcity and demand have proven to retain and even increase value over decades, which makes it a fascinating intersection of history, art, and finance. As we examine the 1953 wheat penny, it becomes clear that the coin is not merely a currency artifact, but a capsule of American history, minting technology, and human era that has been transformed into one of the most highly prized coins of the 20th century. Whether it is the thrill of discovering the doubled mint mark, spotting the faint die crack, analyzing the subtle small date or large date difference, or just appreciating the rarity of a copper penny surviving in such pristine condition, the 1953 wheat penny encapsulates all the excitement, challenge, and reward that coin collecting can offer. Its $11 million valuation reflects not only the scarcity of these error coins, but also the enduring passion of collectors and the competitive auction market. And as new coins occasionally surface, each with its own set of anomalies or historical quirks, the legend of the 1953 wheat penny continues to grow, reminding us that even the smallest coin can hold immense value, a rich history, and a story that captivates generations of collectors, investors, and enthusiasts worldwide, making it one of the most fascinating pieces of numismatic history ever documented.